And here it is, a profile of the toy that I received when I was 6 years old, and it was returned to the store twice for not working. And for years, I wondered what it was. The Plazer ray gun. This was the toy that I got when I was 6 years old, and just totally was mystified what it could be until I was able to buy this in the late 90s. Yes, it's blue and white as I remembered it, with the drop down red tripod leg. And here it is, looking from the front back. So let's talk about it. The Plazer, it's made out of plastic. Let's put the leg up here. And there are really two hand grips that you hold on to. One is this long trigger right here, and the forward one has a shorter trigger. And what is really cool about this is that the ray activity is all seen from inside the chamber. That you look through here, this fits over your face, and you look inside. When you pull the rear trigger, a simulated laser with tone rises up, and you aim it at your target, and then pull the front trigger, and there's an explosion, and a cap goes off. This is such an amazing, cool toy. Every Plazer came with this little metal box. It's actually a cartridge, and you slide the door open, and it is a self-contained cap gun. You put your caps in here, wind it over here to the hammer, and out the bottom, right here. This cartridge is uploaded into the gun in the front handle, just like a real gun right here, and snapped in. When this trigger is employed, it creates the explosion light feature in the viewfinder and pops a cap off. So let's aim at something. Let's say we want to blow up the missile base up there on the shelf. Might be kind of hard to see the missile base. There it is. So let's blow it up. You have a color wheel that allows you to change to a different color. Select what you want in the viewfinder. I want to blow away Robot Commando there up on the shelf. Easy. Obviously, you could sight all sorts of things, like they showed in the commercial. Airplanes, cars, bridges, and of course, probably be sighted for someone who's acting like a terrorist. But you could sight and shoot at anything with the Plazer ray gun. Just an ingenious toy. As you pull the trigger and the laser advances, there's a transistorized laser sound that you heard. Someone has stated that the King Zor up on my filing cabinet is an enemy. We must get rid of him. The Plazer is the tool to do so. So the Plazer is that toy. the toy my father got for me for my birthday. Didn't work. Brought it back. Couldn't get that one to work. And many, many years later, was able to track down and figure out what it was. The interesting thing is once I found this Plazer on eBay and was able to purchase it, I received it in the mail and it didn't work. I went about carefully, and I mean carefully, taking it apart and figuring out what the problem was. And I figured out why many of them obviously didn't work from the factory. And I'm going to show you how this thing works. It is so unknown. This should be the king of the heap in the ray gun world, and nobody seems to know about it. But it is a marvelously engineered item. As a matter of fact, in one of the videos online, a woman reached out and told me that her father invented this. And I've been trying to get a hold of her, find her, track her down. I don't want to be a stalker, but I would love to talk with her, and if I get a chance to, I will do a follow-up video with her remarks and remembrances of her father designing this absolutely wonderful toy. Overall, it is fragile but not shoddily made. It's just fragile in terms of it being thin plastic. I wouldn't have gone running around the backyard shooting things. I'd have been careful with it. Being as it has electronics inside, probably didn't like moisture, probably didn't like to be jarred around too much. And for the kids that were able to have one that did work out of the box, my guess is it didn't last too long with rough play. First things first as we talk about this toy. Unbelievably cool design. It's something out of mid-60s sci-fi, which is exactly when it came out. Yet, it has a timeless appeal to it. This is a brilliant design toy. There's nothing else like this before or since. And it is ingenious how it works. When you see how it works, you'll be delighted. And I'm going to show you that because my other one I have out in the workbench right now, in the workshop, it too does work. But I have it half apart because I was making some small adjustments in it. And as such, I will show you the inside how it works. It's quite appealing. I showed you a little bit about how it has two handles, and they're made for smaller little fingers, but you know, as an adult, it still works. And here's your long trigger. Here's the handle with the shorter trigger. Okay, the logo is absolutely just the logo design. Plazer Ray. That's just so cool. The viewing area is made to fit. There's an accommodation for your nose right there. It's made to fit really any size head. It's really smart. This portion here, this black portion, I'm missing the lens that goes right here. I actually have it. I have to glue it back on. But it has a flip down lens that makes the filters the bright sunlight if you're shooting outside, which is another really cool feature. This right here is the battery compartment. It takes 2 D cells. And this right here is the color wheel selector, red, green, and blue, for what color you want the laser to be. I prefer the red because it's really bright and really cool. Then this is glued on, and I'm always very careful not to knock this and break it. This one has about 1 inch long of a axis right here, of a post if you will. The other one I have is a bit longer. The third model I have is missing this piece, but I got it to work and it's cool. And it's not just a part unit. It's missing a few items, but it works and it's still cool in by itself. At the bottom of it, you see a speaker here, and that's where the sound comes out from that little transistorized mechanism. But look at the design. Look how beautiful that is. That sits on my shelf because it's just so gorgeous. What a toy. What a toy. You can see now as a kid why I was so disappointed this didn't work. How I wanted it to work and how I remembered all these years as the toy that got away, if you will. And I can't believe I've been threatening to make a video on this thing for 10 years, if not more. And finally I am. As I promised, we're back in the workshop. And this is my other functioning Plaisir unit. You'll notice that it has a longer front part here, the little snout that is glued on the front that we're always very cautious of. The other one is shorter for some reason. I don't think it's broken, I just think that maybe they had two different sizes, not short. This one is also, and I've got the pieces for it, but also is missing the flip down darker tint for outside use, but it has the housing for it, thankfully. And this one we're going to take apart, and I'm going to show you. It does work, although there's a few adjustments I need to make on it. We're going to take this apart, and I'm going to show you how this amazing toy works. So first thing we do is we place it on a towel, of course, on its back, and we remove the 6 screws here that hold down the top cover. Got the last one here that we're taking off. And I'm going to flip this back over. And we're going to take off this top part and set it aside. And I'm going to show you the inside of how this works in a moment here. This is a very important part here that has a see-through tinted piece of plastic on this kind of windshield looking affair right here. Very key. I'm going to show you how this works in a moment. For right now, we're going to take off the front panel. So the first thing we do is we slide open the battery compartment. We put that lid over here, and then we remove the 5 screws around the perimeter of this piece right here. One thing worth noting as you take extra care in taking this apart is the battery, the 2 D cells are stacked right here. They're in here. It's a very tight fit. There's a very convenient decal right here that shows you the proper placement of the batteries, proper orientation. And this convenient little strap helps you remove the 2 batteries, which I recommend at least attempting to take out now, because the little strap that right here that lets you pull the batteries out, easier said than done sometimes. There it goes, that one came out good. It is attached here to the inside of this whole piece of plastic here. Okay, so we remove that just like that, and we are now inside the unit. Okay, this is the unit, which I have supported by a couple of tape rolls here. Even though the tripod leg is down, you can see from the inside here, the tripod leg, here's the top of it. It simply is a piece of plastic that friction fits against those little blue uprights right down there. And it's a little flimsy, and I don't trust it to support the thing over a long period of time. So I usually, use a couple of rolls of tape or something like that when I want to display it, or slide something underneath the body of the thing, and then just use the pull-down leg when I want to show how it works, without putting excessive wear and strain on that piece. But here it is with both its top covers off. And you'll note, this back here is, where your nose would go, and your eyes would be looking through this port right here, if the top lid was on. And what you'd be looking at is this tinted screen right here. Okay? So I'm just getting you oriented to where you were and how it relates to where you're at right now. And notice that the screen is on an angle. Okay? And here are the mechanicals and the electronics. And I'm going to show you how things work, and then I'm going to show you what goes wrong. Here are the 4 key areas. The first is the battery compartment. That light bulb right there, which goes off, is what projects through here, through the color wheel, which is right there, right here. Your dial array color wheel. Okay? I'm going to show you how it projects in a moment. This is the mechanism for your rear long throw trigger. Here is the mechanism for the short throw trigger, and this is where your cap unit slides in. The bottom of that handle, like I showed you before. Okay. And down here is the 4th area, which is the electronics, which make up the noise. Okay? So, let me take you through how this thing works, and I'm going to show you what goes wrong with these, has always gone wrong with these, was most certainly what the problem was with the 2 that I got that did not work, and most assuredly will be the problem if you get one of these and it doesn't work. And I'm going to show you how to fix it. Alright, so the play action is, if you remember, with your right hand, you're going to pull slowly back the long travel trigger, which is right here in front of the right hand handle. So pulling that trigger does 3 things. It triggers the sound, and it triggers the light. And it does one other thing as well. There's your light and the laser sound. Okay? Well, how does that light translate into the little laser illusion that I showed you before? Well, this is what's cool about this. The 3rd thing that switch does is it pulls open a shutter. See the shutter moving open? Okay? It reflects the light onto this kind of Fresnel lens down here. You see that? And then you pick the light up on the back of the tinted glass, or tinted glass, and you see the image on the back of the tinted piece of plastic. Pretty cool. That's how it works. It's literally mirrors and light and shutters and a transistorized circuit that makes the noise. Very cool. So again, you start pulling on the trigger, light is activated. As you move this, it moves this shutter up, which makes the illusion of the beam moving upwards. As it's reflected on the Fresnel lens, which you see through the bouncing reflection like a mirror on the dark lens. There's your laser. Okay, now, the other part, like we talked about before, is when you pull the front trigger, you get the explosion. Okay? What the front trigger does is make a contact, and the lower light bulb down here goes off. Okay? Very bright. It's closer to the mirror, so it's a little brighter. Okay? Here's the problem. Here's where it screws up. The problem is this mechanism right here. The top part of this front trigger. So when you pull the front trigger, this brass tab right here, this part of the brass tab right here rises and makes contact with this, the bottom of this rivet right here, or this wire, which is then going to feed the power to the rear light. It also, by lifting off where the strap normally rests, it breaks power. It's hard to see because it doesn't move that much. See it? See it? It breaks power to the front light and the transistor mechanism. So what happens is the laser and the transistor stop, you get a big light flash and the snap of the cap, like an explosion. And then when you release this trigger, okay, you re-energize the circuit that has the light and the transistor sound. Okay? So that was why when we were watching and you track and you're aiming your laser at something and you want to blow it up, you hit this trigger, it gives you the big flash, it cuts the sound and the power of the laser, and then you can resume the laser and shoot more things if you wish. Herein lies the problem. This strap, okay, if the flat part of this is not connecting properly to the little rivet head that's underneath it, you can't see it, but it's like one of these right here. Not much surface area for contact. So imagine that little rivet area that lies right underneath here, okay? If that doesn't make good contact, you'll never get the laser and the light sound. If this piece doesn't hit the top of that correctly, you'll never get the rear light. And right now it only works if I push the trigger really deep in, then it works, okay? The skill you have to have is adjust by bending this tab here so that it will touch this with enough force to make contact without bending it in such a way that it lifts this part so that when it's in a non-triggered state that it doesn't lie flat enough to come in contact at rest with the connector underneath it. That's the problem. This thing gets jarred a little bit, gets moved around, you get oxidation underneath, dirt, anything like that, and it doesn't make the at-rest connection, you'll never have your laser effect. If you bend it too far back or anything like that, it won't make this top connection properly when you pull the trigger. That is why they don't work. That's the problem, is this whole thing needed to be beefier. That was the only thing. That was the only thing. And that's why they don't work. And it took me a while to figure out, you know, where all these wires lead and what they do. But I got this one working pretty darn good. And at times the transistor doesn't climb in tone and is a little irregular. But I don't want to play with it so much that, you know, something breaks or something like this. I actually removed this entire unit with these 2 screws and cleaned, blew everything out, cleaned and tightened and adjusted it the best I could. And it works pretty well. It's not perfect, but it works pretty well. The other thing that I did is this lens was completely loose and had gaps on either side. It still worked. It was real cool. And what I did is I wanted to do a fix that wouldn't damage something. So I used low temperature hot glue and put a bead down there and one up here and laid it back in there. Laid it back and pressed it in there, and it worked great. This whole unit right here, the Mylar plastic holder, for want of a better word, slides up and out. Everything else I just really cleaned up really well, and it works. So that is what the inside of the Plazer looks like. And if that's not ingenious, I don't know what is. You can also see how in some ways it's rugged, in other ways it's delicate. And a lot of people aren't, you know, going to understand when they open this thing up what goes where and why it's not working. But with patience and time, you certainly can fix these. Again, here's rear trigger. So pulling it back. here's the front trigger, without the cap, of course. The explosion. Very cool. So now we'll reassemble this one, and I'll show you my third Plazer. So this is my third Plazer, and this one was sold as, you know, well used. I think I paid $75 for it a long time ago. It came with its own box, in very good shape. The little end piece is broken off. It didn't have it with it. I always thought about fabricating something. It's missing some other parts as well, and we're going to take this one apart. This did work. It's missing the Mylar screen on the inside, which I can replace it. I'm going to, so that I have it completely operational. But I did have it making noise and shooting this laser when I put it away in its box, and it's not doing anything right now, which, that's because it's a Plazer. It still does have its nifty logo here, which is done in more of a chrome. I don't know if that's because the black wore off, or if some of them are black and some of them are chrome. I'm not sure, but that is, I just love that logo, Plazer Ray. So let's pop this one apart and see what's going on the inside as well. So here we are with the tops off the number 3, and just as I thought, if we press down a little bit on this tab to make contact and pull the trigger, there's a transistor sound. However, there's no front light nor any rear light. So the first thing I'm going to see is I'm going to put a little connector in here. Maybe a little thin screwdriver. Or actually, what we'll do, we'll take a little bit of little brass piece and wedge it in here. Make better contact. There it goes. See the dimly lit back bulb there when we shove this piece of brass in there and make contact? See? And then I pull on the trigger and it goes out. That is weird. There's a bad connection going on there somewhere. I'm going to have to take that apart. But you can see the rear light bulb lighting up. And if I take the piece of brass out, off it goes. Even if I pull the trigger, it doesn't come on. So again, the problem, all in this contact area. It's probably all dirty on both sides and not wanting anything to happen. Now, this bulb not lighting makes me wonder if there's a connection problem right up here, or if the light bulb burned out. So let's have a look-see here. It's gonna be a little. Okay. Well, what do you say, Mr. Camera? You can see this better than my eye can. That looks like the filament's still intact. Let's try an experiment here. I've got a known good C-cell battery here with the wire. Yep. Bulb is fine. The contacts in here, or the wire that goes up to this, is a problem. Right in here. So we're going to do some voltage checks on that, see if it's getting any voltage. And Okay. If I squeeze the trigger, yep, I'm getting voltage. Okay. So that means the bulb simply is not making good contact in here. Right in here. We're going to take some sandpaper, clean that up, bend the terminals so they put a little more pressure on the bulb, and I'll bet you anything it'll fire right back up. Voila! Some contact cleaner, bending the prongs to put more pressure on it, and putting in this top battery was a little low. I used a better battery now. And if you look in the back, you can see on the Fresnel screen there, you can see the laser in green. And then if I press the trigger back far enough, I will get the rear one to light, but it's catch as catch can. I've got to make some adjustments, which is the problem child, as I said, right in this area. I'll make those adjustments, and then what I'm going to do is get a piece of tinted plastic and cut it to fit here and glue it in. This also is missing its monopod right here. So what I thought about doing is getting a round piece of plastic, fashioning a little foot on it, and an end piece, maybe thread something onto it. But as you can see, is the inside, this frame is in good shape. The reflecting screen is in good shape. Everything's in good shape, nice and clean. And I'm glad I got it back working again. But this old bugaboo right here is what the problem always is on these. So number 3 is about where it was when I left it, because I remember I did have it working. So number 3, about 85% of where I want it to be. So just simply sprayed contact cleaner right in here, then blew it out with some canned air, and look what that's done for us. Rear trigger, front trigger, rear trigger, front trigger. Sometimes that may be all you need to do. So that part of the mechanism done. No more disassembly needed. Alright gang, we're back in the workshop, and as we left off before, this is Plazer number 3, and this was the one that was missing parts and wasn't functional. I've been working on it back here, doing various things with it, and I'll share some with you. I was going to leave the gun without any tip on it because it was missing it, and I decided, you know, what can I fabricate that'll look halfway decent? So I made this, and I used material that was exactly the right diameter. I've acquired this tip from another source. I spray painted them, and it's not exactly the same as the original, but it's an interesting variation. And I hot glued it on, so if I ever find something better, or I knock it off accidentally, I can simply hot glue it back. And it worked out really nice. I think it looks kind of cool. The problem we still have with this one is there's the reflecting screen right there, but there's no display screen, if you will, the part that you actually look at. It was always missing. We have the cage for it, but the material's missing. I looked sources all over to find material that was 3/100 of an inch thick that would go right in the slot holder right there. And I could find nothing that was the darkness or the thickness that I needed. So I found something that looks right here, a polycarbonate that looks like it's dark and should work well. You can see that. About the right level of darkness. I'm going to cut a piece, and then what I'm going to do, instead of worrying about trying to jam it in the slots where it belonged, I'm actually going to glue it to the front of the holder and see how it works out. We're going to try that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it with a cutter, which is always a pain in the rear with these cutters, cutting any of this polycarbonate. But since this is only 1/8 inch thick, it should go fine. I had I think it was 1/4 or 3/8 on my spaceship, and that I cut with this same cutter, and boy, was that a nightmare. So we're going to try it on here, measure and cut the appropriate size, and see what we end up with. I had to pay 20 bucks to get a foot square piece of this. I'm going to use a tiny little corner, but let's see what happens. Fit it in place. Now let's see if it works. Drop the assembly into the slots. Until it thunks into place. And let's just do a quick test here. Well, the third placer I had, really a parts placer that I got for $75, missing the nose, missing the internal laser screen, not functional. Then I got it kind of functional, then it stopped working, is now working 100%. And the 1/8 inch Tuff-Ak plexiglass that I used, or polycarbonate that I used, which is much thicker than the original, but I glued it to the front of the frame rather than try to insert it in the frame, and it worked perfectly. The clearances were fine, and the tint is almost spot on. I reconstructed a new nose, cleaned it up. It is not by any stretch of the imagination perfect. It is in fine condition now. I didn't do things like, I could have, you know, scraped off the residue of this red tape that was used here and respray it with something, or put some red tape down. I'm just going to leave that. I've cleaned it up. It is faded, but it is still pretty darn good shape. Really cool. I'm so pleased how this came out. And now I have 3 fully functional placers. And here they are, all 3 of my placers, which all now work. I don't think I've ever had them all out and all next to each other at the same time, and certainly not all working at the same time. So this is very, very, very cool. I hope you've enjoyed this video.